So this week we continue with the sermon series entitled Love the Sinner but Hate the Cliche. Last week we considered the cliche, everything happens for a reason. And this morning we begin in a place where likely none of us want to be, but likely all of us are in one way or another at one time or another, and that place is suffering. Now hopefully you won't feel like you have to suffer through my sermon. The reality is, though, that we all have or will at some point experience suffering. Physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, and often a combination of more than one of these. Some of us have experienced the death of a loved one, a grandparent, a parent, a spouse, or even a child. Some of us have suffered illnesses or lived with a loved one who is struggling with disease and seemingly endless treatments. Some of us have experienced the pain of divorce or another relationship that has been broken. Suffering occurs when an entire group of people is ignored or oppressed. Suffering occurs when an individual is not called by the name of their choice and is rejected as the person they know that they are. Suffering occurs when someone is lost in depression or addiction. Suffering occurs when our ability to flourish is undermined or taken from us by natural circumstances, systemic injustices, poor choices, or a combination of these. Suffering has many faces. If you're young enough or fortunate enough to not yet have experienced suffering, your time is coming. It's going to happen, and it affects us all. And sometimes, let's get real, it can be really overwhelming. After all, we are only human. We're not superhuman as much as we would like to be. So, in the midst of your suffering, if someone says to you, God won't give you more than you can handle, how does that make you feel? Is it helpful? Is your suffering somehow lessened? Do you feel comforted? What if it feels like you really do have more than you can handle? What does that say about you? What does that say about God? Imagine how this cliche would sound to the survivor of a concentration camp, to a young girl sold into prostitution, to a mother who has lost her children in war. God won't give you more than you can handle. Sounds cruel, even heartless, doesn't it? Perhaps this cliche is well-meaning, meant to console or to somehow ease our hurting. But does it accurately express what we believe to be true about God and about discipleship and about our relationship with each other? The truth is that none of us can really handle life, at least not alone. Sometimes life does give us more than we can handle. If we think we can or should do it all by ourselves, then what are we saying about our trust in God? When life is more than we can handle, everything feels out of control. And we all like to be in control, don't we? We prepare and plan for every possible tragedy. Buy insurance, not let our kids out of sight, lock the doors at night. But we can't ever plan for that event that comes at us sideways. Sometimes we suffer the consequences of our actions, but not always. We are not the cause of every trial we face, and sometimes we don't even know the cause. We inhabit a world that is not as it should be. Accidents happen because someone was careless, or maybe through no fault of anybody's. We suffer illnesses, often through no fault of our own. When we say God won't give you more than we can handle to others or even to ourselves, it's often said to soothe our own anxieties. Maybe it's well-intended. Maybe we think it's encouraging someone to be strong enough to face whatever circumstances before them, or maybe just because we don't know what to say. Our American culture of independence and self-reliance supports this kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thinking. But in reality, it often doesn't help much, but provides the speaker with an opportunity not to get involved, to distance themselves from any responsibility with the other person's suffering. There's no need to help because the other person should be able to handle it. But to the one suffering, this phrase could be heard: please don't ask for help, because you should be able to handle this, whatever you're going through, because God in his divine omniscience gave it to you. Seeing others suffer reminds us of our own susceptibility to suffering and makes us uncomfortable, even fearful. We could lose our jobs. We could lose our spouse. The hope we have for our kids' future could be erased by opioids. And we wonder, if that happens to me, can I handle it? So we distance ourselves and offer a cliche, hoping that if they can handle it, we might be able to handle it too. The support that is often given for God won't give you more than you can handle comes from 1 Corinthians 10:13. God is faithful. He will not let you be tested or tempted beyond what you can bear. Notice that the verse is about temptation. It's not about being overwhelmed by all the things that happen to us in life. Within the context, Paul is talking about the temptation to sin and what it means to be a faithful follower of Christ. The Message Bible puts it this way: no test or temptation that comes your way is beyond the course of what others have had to face. All you need to remember is that God will never let you down. He'll never let you be pushed past your limit. He'll always be there to help you come through it. And actually, the implication that we can always handle what storm threatens us is not even biblical. If anything, it's the exact opposite. In 2 Corinthians 1, Paul describes the troubles he experienced in his travels in Asia. He writes, "We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself." But the good news is that Scripture reminds us over and over again that God is faithful. It's not that life doesn't happen to us, or that once we become believers and followers of Jesus, all our troubles somehow magically disappear. Instead, we are now supported by the one who has called us and chosen us and loves us and brought us into this new family of faith. God promises that when we wander through the valley of the shadow of death that does sometimes feel like more than we can handle, God is there. God, through Jesus, became human and met us in the most common human experiences, including temptation, suffering, betrayal, humiliation, and death. God finds us in the chaos of our lives. God is intimately familiar with us and with our needs, and is acutely aware of the darkness that we walk in, even in those times when God seems far away. Our faith allows us to see that this broken world, filled with tragedy and injustice, just is not the way the world is supposed to be, nor will it be forever. It is not the last word. Instead, we hold to the hope that the central claims of Christianity are the underpinnings of reality. Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. No matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, no matter what we're going through, God is with us. and we are with each other. We must be with each other. Here's another nuance of our passage. The yous in verse 13 are plural, not singular. Paul never presumes that temptations and life issues are meant to be borne by an individual alone. We are meant to face hardships within community. When I was in my 40s and going through a separation and divorce after more than 20 years of marriage, I was afraid my family and friends would judge me and reject me, and indeed, some did, but others did not. They were present for me to listen, to share their own experiences, their own life lessons, and to provide tangible support in any way that they could. We are not meant to face life alone, but in community, serving one another, sharing in life's joys and sorrows, not trying to avoid or minimize the hard times. Listening, learning, praying together, empathizing are not more than we can handle. They're precisely what we as Christians are called to do. Consider that the word religion shares the same Latin root as ligament, a word meaning to bind. For many of us living in America, this concept is countercultural since we're led to believe that we can or should be able to handle it all ourselves. But we are called to Christian community, which focuses on interdependence. We are bound together. Communities of faith are not so much about pulling up those bootstraps, but about working together to provide boots for those who have none and to help each other put them on. The church is not meant to be a loose association of functional lone rangers. Paul confronts this type of thinking numerous times in his letters when he encourages us to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Paul describes community like this: so that we who are many are one body in Christ, and individually we are members one of another. We are bound together. When we are a community, we bear one another's burdens and do what we can to help each other through the difficult times. Sometimes, when people are in the shock of new grief, though, they're not yet able to process what it is that they really need. Do something anyway. Something you can do to demonstrate your love. During the first few months of my separation, for example, my great aunt, knowing that separation and divorce often create financial hardships, helped me financially, even though I didn't ask for it. She knew that it was needed. If a person in grief can't answer, "What can I do to help you?" just do what you can. Even small acts are memorable. And keep coming back. Keep being present. Eventually, they may feel comfortable enough asking for what they need. Most importantly, they'll know that you are there for them. So how then can we choose our words carefully so that they are of honest support when we are addressing people who are hurting? Instead of saying God won't give you more than you can handle, consider God helps us handle what we've got. Have a conversation about what that means, seeing life within the context of community. God created us to be in authentic relationships with one another and with God. That's why it's so important for us to be together in fellowship with other Christians, both in worship and in relationships. We need to be open and aware of one another's needs. God has given us to each other for mutual support. God is faithful and is with you even when you doubt, even when we lack trust, especially when we don't feel like we can do this alone. We are not alone. We have God and we have each other. We can share our burdens and be available to others who are struggling. Because God doesn't give us what we can't handle. God helps us handle what we've got.